everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Liana. Today we're going to be talking about privilege. And I know this can be a little bit of a tricky subject, and I know some of us can even feel kind of attacked when we broach the subject of privilege. So I hope that you'll at least approach this with an open mind and an open heart when you sit down with me today. Privilege is one of those things that's become an increasingly hot button issue. It can be kind of confusing, sometimes frustrating for us to come to terms with. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, when I heard the word privilege, I had an automatic association to somebody who was very well off socioeconomically. So I never really associated privilege with anything else. I just thought privilege meant you were very, very wealthy. And I think a lot of people kind of grew up thinking this way. So maybe you're like me, and similarly, you only ever heard privilege equated to money. This can make it hard for many of us later in life when we're trying to grapple with what privilege actually means, when we're hearing conversations about privilege being equated to things outside of class. Because for many of us, throughout many of our childhoods and growing up into our teen years, privilege was only ever associated with things that we did not have, not the things that we did have. And I know that for many of us, we have lived through certain hardships, and the harder that our lives have been, the harder it can be to accept that we are privileged in certain ways. It can be hard to understand that privilege comes in many different forms, and that we all of us have some sort of privilege. The more freely that we can move through society without any sort of barrier, the more privilege that we have. And the easier it is to take for granted the fact that we have privilege in the first place, the harder it can be to see the privilege that's there. Now, I'm lucky enough today to be having a few people contribute to this video. A few of my friends, I asked them if they wanted to contribute, and they said yes. As of my recording today, I don't know exactly how many are going to be contributing, but I will have a few. And so before I go too much further into this video, I am going to insert their contributions here so you can hear them speak. I do think that it's very important to hear other people speak about their lived experiences. Everybody's lived experiences are going to be different than what we feel and what we see and what we experience. And so I hope to demonstrate that today, that everybody holds different privileges and everybody doesn't have certain privileges that others do. So here are my friends now.
Hello, my name is Monetta Wilson. I am from a small island in the Caribbean, and I was educated in the United States. I have a bachelor's degree from one of the top schools in the United States, as well as a master's degree. I did not know what privilege was growing up. I grew up in a mainly black country, and so the color of my skin never mattered. I felt disadvantaged coming from a poor family and a single parent household. That's the only time I ever felt disadvantaged. However, now I do recognize what privilege is, especially having lived in the US. I recognize all the privileges that I don't have, as well as the privileges that I have. My education affords me a lot of privileges to go into spaces that I would not otherwise be able to go into. But at the same time, the fact that I am female, the fact that my skin is black, and it doesn't matter what my heritage is, because when people look at me, they see a black person. That actually closes a lot of doors to me, and that's actually pretty disheartening. Even in my own country, as a yoga instructor, people just don't see it when they see me. Even before I gained weight and I was super skinny, people just still did not see me as a yoga teacher. It's a privilege that I did not have because of the color of my skin and because of where I was born. So most of the privilege that I personally have is because of my education. However, there are a lot of places where I am disadvantaged. The other privileges that I enjoy is being cisgender and not having to worry about being afraid for my life or for being served because of my gender, because of being cisgender and not being transgender. Also, I used to be skinny all my life. Some people would still say I'm average sized, and so I was always treated differently, especially in the US, because of that. It's not something that I even dwelled on because, like the color of my skin, there was nothing that I did to be thin. It's just the size that I had always been. And so, because of my education and my size, people would often treat me well, but often it would have to be, I would have to say what my education was to get treated well. Or we would be in a situation where people would know of my educational background and then I would get treated well. Because I feel like the disadvantage of your race and of being female, that's what people see first when they see you. They see a black woman and they immediately discount you. On the face of it, what I say does not matter in a lot of situations. On the face of it, a lot of people don't care what I have to say. When they look at me, they see an uneducated black woman because my education, I do not wear it on me. Even one time I was wearing the cap from my undergrad and someone says to me, "Oh, this your boyfriend went there?" And I went, "No, I did." And now most recently I have to come to grips with being disabled and the fact that because I have chronic illness, there's a lot I cannot do. And people dismiss me for that too. I haven't been able to go to church in years, or really many places, because of my fragrance sensitivity. I find people are not willing to make allowances for any disadvantaged population. And so my lack of privilege right now affects my ability to earn a living, my ability to be accommodated in doing the things that I'd like to do, and so many other things. There's nothing I can do about the color of my skin, about being female, about being disabled, than to continue to fight for myself and for people like me so that we are recognized as fully human. I think why people don't want to think that privilege exists because of the fact that we live in a capitalist patriarchal society, and people think that you can work your way out of anything, and being well is seen as a virtue, and people think that you can overcome anything, and they don't want the responsibility of their privilege. They don't want to say, yes, I have this privilege, I should do X. They want to say that you are not doing as well as me because you are not working as hard. We think that the only thing that makes you successful in life is the how hard you work. So anything that suggests otherwise, people tend to feel attacked when you say you have X privilege and you have Y privilege. And privilege is inherent in the type of society we have because of what we value. So it depends on where you live, the culture of where you live, what people value the most. But all over the world, most of our societies are capitalist. People want power, and they will do anything to hold on to that power that they already have, and they won't give it up, and they won't want to concede. I think this all makes sense. um I think we have to continue to fight to show people that having privilege is not a bad thing, and it's how you use that privilege that matters. So, because this is the society we live in, we have to make the best of what the society already is. So, it's okay to have privilege as long as you recognize that that privilege puts you ahead of others, and that you can just reach back and grab a hand and use your position to help someone in a lower position than you. And also that we all have the right to be fully human. And what privilege does is it says that some people are inherently better than others because of nothing they did, but because of things like the color of their skin, where they were born, the lottery they got, what body they got. And so we have to admit that everybody has a right to enjoy the life that they have. And my personal ethos is that if I can make the difference in one life, then my own life has been useful, has a purpose. If I can help one person be a little more comfortable during their time on earth. I don't know if any of this makes sense. Privilege is a very complex topic and one that people don't want to talk about. But I am very happy to be part of this collaborative effort, and I hope we continue to keep the conversation open. Thank you to Liana for inviting me to be a part of this. Thank you for watching, and I hope we can continue the conversation.
Danse, Brian Campbell, Nitsika-san. My name is Brandon Campbell, but you will know me as MXD 2S Prairie N8B or Mixed 2S Prairie Native on Instagram. So this is just my take on privilege as a mixed two-spirit Prairie Native. So just answering the questions in order. Uh, Privilege growing up, um, I think for me, it largely was perceived in like classed terms. Like I knew I was poorer than the other kids that I grew up with, and I grew up largely with like middle class and upper middle class like white kids. So I was aware that I was poorer, and I was aware that it was somehow connected to being native or indigenous. And but I didn't really understand the connection. I just knew that that's what it was, and I kind of felt it. Um, Versus now, I would say that my understanding of privilege is a lot more complicated. I can see my own privilege relative to my own family and community, especially in having access to those communities growing up. It gave me more opportunities that I know that some of my family didn't get, um, and just other opportunities I've gained over the years have really helped me understand that. I also have done a lot of learning from Black organizers over the years, and that really helped me understand my proximity to whiteness. Something I didn't really think about growing up, but was always kind of aware of, but didn't really think of. So yeah, it's changed quite a bit. In terms of the privileges I hold now, again, I'm white passing, or I have proximity to whiteness more so than many of my family and friends within the Native community, or just racialized folks generally. I have a lot more proximity to whiteness than a lot of racialized folks have. Um, I also I've had some upward class mobility. Like I'm not rich by any means, but like I've had access to post-secondary education and had so many opportunities that definitely cost a lot of money in terms of like traveling and visiting the world. So that's definitely like a privilege that I have now, and that that experience also is itself a privilege because it allows me to learn and see things. Has allowed me to learn and see things that so many people I know here in the prairies have never really known or experienced, and that itself gives me like perspective that they don't have. So privileges I do not have. Well, I'm not straight. Um, I am. I also am not cis, but I do recognize that I can pass as cis, being non-binary. But I recognize that I'm perceived as a man. So I'm likely not as likely to experience gendered violence. Um, I'm also not rich. I'm not poor either. But I don't have access to intergenerational wealth. Um, many of my family have just kind of survived, and are more fortunate than they were when they were younger. But still, I'm not rich by any means of the imagination. And then I think to answer the last question, I think so many of us struggle with understanding privilege because, um, well, one, we don't realize that it's not really this binary of privilege versus not privilege. It's much more like, I don't know, it's the most effective phrase I've ever heard is proximity to power, which is very relative. So, um, compared to like a white settler here in the prairies, I have less proximity to power, but compared to my family members, I have more proximity to power. Um, and it depends on the context as well. There's so many different things that like so many systems of oppression that operate together that you're talking about privilege is so complicated because it really depends on what you're talking about and with whom, and their own proximities to power, which can be very, very different from yours and things. And I think also privilege is people find it, I think a lot of people find it difficult to talk about privilege because they find it difficult to understand that systems of oppression aren't just based off of like personal opinion and um, stereotypes, but are ingrained in how we operate as a society, um, and and that like people who are relatively not in privilege compared to someone in privilege, again depending on what privilege, um, they're more likely to face barriers, um, in just trying to live, a basic life in ways that people with relative privilege won't really know or experience. So like if you talk about racism, for example, a lot of people just think that racism is just negative views of non-white folks, um, and stereotypes, but it's a lot more entrenched than that. It's standards of professionalism, is tied to whiteness, which implies that capitalism and whiteness are also tied together. Standards of beauty is also tied to whiteness. Um, just the historical establishment of these societies, like Canada, for example, is built on stolen land, at the expense of Indigenous peoples, and other racialized peoples who were excluded from the opportunities to gain wealth, which is why there's more white folks that have intergenerational wealth than non-white folks. So, like a lot of people just kind of reduce systems of oppression to being um, prejudices, and they don't realize that there's also power that's tied to them. Um, and and for that reason, I think they're kind of resistant to this idea that they might have privilege, and then have this very liberal under, understanding that if they just simply unpack their negative views of people, then they've done all that they need to do. And then they think that the racism or whatever system of oppression we're discussing just goes away. I think the only thing I want to add to this already long video is this post that popped up in my memories on Facebook that is very, very pertinent to this whole conversation. It's from 2 years ago, shortly after a friend of mine, um, a very messy white person, kind of cut me out of her life and then did a lot more messy things. So it's kind of a reflection on that, but also just other white people that I've had in my life. Okay, so this is the quote. I am of the firm belief that everyone's feelings matter, even the feelings of the whiniest white settlers and straight people. But I also believe that just because these feelings matter doesn't mean it's the responsibility of people of color or queers to help white settlers or straights process those feelings. Nor does it mean that people of color or queers should be faulted for those whiny or straight feelings. I think we forget it as adults that it's not just children who whine, complain, and react defensively. Adults do it too, and white settlers and straights are definitely no exception. I've seen it so many times in just my 4 short years of learning. I can't imagine what visibly racialized, i.e., not white looking, indigenous folks and people of color have gone through in their lives from white folks, or what loud and proud since their teen years queers have witnessed from the straights. To my browner and black native fam and POC relations, I'm going to commit to learning and holding space for the white passing native folks and POC in their anti-racist learning so that y'all don't have to. To my trans siblings, I'm going to commit to learning and holding space for the cis folks in their learning of transphobia so that y'all don't have to. So yeah, that was from 2 years ago. I think the only change that I can make to that is that I think in learning to understand my gender identity, I think my responsibility to cis folks or non-trans folks has changed. Again, I still have a lot of I still pass as cis. I'm still gonna be read as a man. So I think I have more responsibility certainly than like trans femme, trans masc, and non-passing, non-binary folks do. And I definitely want to recognize that they're going to face more likely to face gendered violence than I am. But I think it just my responsibility to that has shifted because I don't see myself as cis. I don't understand myself as that. Um, but yeah, so this is just 10-minute video almost of my understanding of privilege and how it's changed over the years, especially as a mixed 2S prairie native. Yeah.
Now, my friend Kaleena didn't feel up to making a video contribution. She did send in a text contribution. I'm going to put that up on the screen and then I'm going to read that off to you as I have permission to do so. She also took a photo of a chart that she made, which was a really great idea, and I'll put that on the screen as well and show you what that looks like.
From what I understand, privilege works on a scale rather than being something you have or you don't. By that I mean you can be lacking some privilege in an area, but still have privilege in another. When you are not privileged in many areas such as class or socioeconomic status, it can be harder to see when you are privileged in other areas such as race or gender. In my personal experience, it was with my weight. I wouldn't say that I was blatantly offensive when faced with my thin privilege, but I'm not too proud to say that there was some denial or pushback when it was brought to my attention in the past. To expand on that thought, I used to be more vocal with friends about the need to be sensitive when speaking about anybody's weight, whether thin or otherwise, and while I still find that important as it can be triggering to anybody, I do now better recognize that people who aren't thin face a very different societal judgment and that I, as someone who's always been thin, have never experienced that. And it's important to always keep that in mind when the subject arises. That is something I had to learn and do better with in regards to being cognizant to that unique experience and my own privilege. I find this similar to the number of white people I've come across who do not have financial or socioeconomic privilege, people who live in poverty, not understanding their white privilege or understanding that Black and other people of color, regardless of their financial situations, have never had or experienced that privilege. And so here's a chart that Kaleena made that says have and have not. In the have column, she's listed sexual orientation as a privilege that she has. She does not have racial privilege. She does have weight privilege. She does not have income privilege. She does have cisgender privilege. She does not have gender, aka female privilege. She once passed as able-bodied. She currently does not have able-bodied privilege or mental health privilege. She is a U.S. citizen. She does not have geographic privilege. She is above a poverty line, but she does not have class privilege. She does have religious privilege. She does not have learning style privilege. She does have family makeup privilege and language privilege.
Now, I would like to take the time to tell you about the privileges that I personally hold or don't hold and how that has affected my personal life and how others see me and treat me. So I do have cisgender privilege. Cisgender privilege means that I identify with the sex I was assigned at birth. I was assigned female at birth, and female is how I identify. Because of this, there are a lot of different things that I don't face in my everyday life. For example, if I go to the bathroom out in public, I don't have to worry about which bathroom I'm going to use. I don't have to worry about the harassment I'm going to potentially face if I go to the bathroom out in public. or any dressing rooms that I might be facing if I go into a store. I don't have to worry about anybody questioning the gender I identify as. I don't have to worry about anybody questioning if I have a mental illness because I identify a certain way. I don't have to fear, say, if I ever at some point ended up in a shelter, I don't have to worry about would they house me with my correct gender, and I don't have to worry about would they even house me at all. These are all things that a lot of us who are cisgender don't even think about on a daily basis because we just simply take them for granted. Likewise, I don't even have to worry about being misgendered on a daily basis. Whereas if I were under the trans umbrella, I would likely face that on a daily basis. I currently have size privilege. I didn't always have this. So currently I'm at a size where I am accepted by society and I can see myself in advertisements. My body type is very well represented, and I can easily find clothing in any store that I go to. Now, granted, I'm a little bit on the short side. Maybe I have to hem things to a certain length so that they fit my legs properly. But in terms of fitting around my stomach and things like that, everything fits me pretty darn well. I wasn't always this way. I was over 200 pounds at one point at my heaviest, and I was clinically overweight for many years of my life. So when I was overweight, I was treated a lot differently. Going into stores, it was difficult to find clothing that would fit me. More so, it was how people would treat me, specifically in the medical field. Anytime I had to go to the hospital for something that was wrong with me, like in the emergency room, I get a lot of migraines, so I used to go to the ER a lot for those. They would automatically associate it with my weight. They would tell me to lose weight, then I would get less migraines. That's not the case. My migraines had nothing to do with my weight. Because I remember after every ER visit, one of the things they would always tell me to do was to lose weight. And it's just, well, guess what? I lost weight. I still get migraines. I lost weight. I still have chronic pain. And that's something that a lot of people who are fat or plus size, I use both terms here because different people identify differently. They're going to come up against a bunch of different fatphobic issues in the medical industry, especially. They're going to be told that if they just lose weight, then this issue will get better, and this issue will get better, and this issue will get better. And that's usually not the case, especially if it's a chronic illness. Certain medical equipment is not built for fat bodies and plus size bodies. MRI equipment doesn't always accommodate people in fat and plus size bodies. Even blood pressure cuffs doesn't accommodate everybody. If you're going on a flight, maybe the seating won't accommodate you. I remember a few years back when Kevin Smith, the actor and director, was going on a flight, they kicked him off because they said he was a fire hazard. He wasn't even that big at the time. So there's just a whole bunch of things, again, that we don't realize unless we're living in a fat or plus size body. And when we're thinner, we just don't experience that. We don't experience the looks that come in public when we're living in a fat and plus size body. The sort of look that's like, you're disgusting, you need to lose weight, it's your fault, everything's your fault for being the size that you are, sort of thing. I do have religious privilege. I don't identify with any sort of religion, so I guess that would make me atheist. If I identified as Christian or Catholic, that would give me privilege too. If I identified with any religion that was the prevalent religion in my area, that would give me privilege. For a lot of people, that means that if you're Jewish or Muslim, you're going to experience some sort of marginalization, unless that religion is the dominant religion in your area. There are some places in the world where Christian and Catholic is actually the smaller religion in the area, and they do face discrimination the same way that Muslim and Jewish people face here. So basically, for example, I don't face discrimination in the way that my religion is portrayed in the media. We're not portrayed as terrorists. We're not portrayed as the villains. For a lot of other religions, they're often portrayed as villains. They're often portrayed as evil people. And this, a lot of it has to do with casting in movies. A lot of it has to do with anti-Semitic tropes dating back hundreds of years. Just these insidious things that have built their way into our societies, and so we see other religions as bad just because they aren't deemed the norm wherever we live. But I'm not going to be attacked for my religion. In Quebec, for example, here we have Bill 21 that rules that people who have religious wear, such as hijab or Magen David, Star of David, they can't wear those if they're like a teacher. They can't do anything like that. They can't wear those in Quebec, and that's a form of religious discrimination. I wouldn't have to worry about that. I wouldn't even have to worry about that if I was Christian and wearing a cross, as far as I know. So those are forms of religious discrimination I don't face on a daily basis. Of course, I have skin color privilege, or white privilege. This is probably the one that is hardest for people to come to terms with, because they feel like, well, if I've grown up poor, then I don't have privilege in other areas, especially racial privilege. But there are so many different categories of privilege, as we're kind of discussing here, that yes, it is possible for you to not have privilege in one area and to have privilege in another, especially racial privilege. So a few examples of this: if I go into a store, I'm not going to be followed around specifically because of my race. I don't think I've ever been followed around in a store. If I go into a store, I can probably find an employee that looks like me and can help me find like a hair care product, a skincare product, a makeup product that's going to work for my skin tone or my hair type. Going on with the hair thing, I can go into a hair salon and can be reasonably sure that I will find somebody of my race who is comfortable working with my hair. In Ontario, there are no set guidelines for who has to work on like 4C, 4B, 4A hair types. So a lot of hairdressers in Ontario have no experience working on those hair types. If I call the police, I can be pretty sure that they are going to help me and not show up and harass me or hurt me just because of my skin tone. If I apply for a job, I can be pretty sure that they're not going to throw away my resume just because of the sound of my name. If I go to the ER, I can be pretty sure that they're not going to disregard me as some sort of drug addict because of my race. And I can be pretty sure that I'm going to see doctors and nurses there who are my race. In the future, when I'm looking for housing, I can be pretty sure that I'm not going to be turned away because of my race, and also that I can find people in the neighborhood who are also my race. These are not guarantees for people who are Black, Brown, Indigenous, etc. So these sound like small things. They're not. And these are just a few small examples. These aren't even large examples. These can progress over time to things that expand into violent acts. Now, if we're going to talk about privileges I don't have class privilege on my own. I do have associated class privilege because I am able to live with the support of my family. If I didn't have support of my family, I wouldn't have class privilege. Because I live solely on an ODSP income, which is under $900 a month. You would be hard pressed to find rent that's under $900 a month. And then when you add in food, when you add in utilities, when you add in medical bills, I'm more than poor. I'm in the negative. I couldn't afford all of that. I would be having to choose between rent. I would having to choose between food and medical bills. I wouldn't be able to afford all of them. I don't have able-bodied privilege. I haven't had able-bodied privilege since I was 9 years old. So when I go through society, and this is tied to my class privilege or lack thereof, basically I have a lot of people who look at me and tell me that it's my fault that I'm on disability, that I'm a leech to society. I've had people tell me that I should be kicked off of ODSP and go live in a tent city in Hamilton where I should freeze like all of the bugs in the wintertime and basically just die. So that was really lovely. And that was like a public comment on my YouTube channel too. I have people constantly question my worthiness as a human being because I'm disabled. Should I be here in this world? This is what a lot of disabled people find, is that able-bodied people are just like, well, you're not as productive as the rest of us, therefore, why are you here? Why are you alive? I currently would not be able to get my own apartment without an able-bodied person signing on the lease for me. I currently would not be able to find a job in most places because employers don't like hiring disabled people, specifically because they don't like accommodating us. Even if I wanted to work from home, I still have to work on my own schedule, which again, they don't want to accommodate us. They want us to work on their time. I can rarely make it a full week without a medical appointment. I need to constantly have some sort of physical therapy or massage therapy, which costs a lot of money. These are all things that a lot of able-bodied people just don't have to worry about. I'm constantly worrying about the future and what I'm going to do if I'm still on disability and can't get a job. I'm constantly wondering where I'm going to live in the future. Just like lots of different things that I'm worrying about. I'm constantly worrying about if I leave the house, is the place I'm going to go to going to have a place for me to sit down? Is it going to be accessible? Am I going to have enough energy that day to even leave the house? These are just all little things that add up in my mind, and able-bodied people don't have to think about that. This isn't even a full list, and there are certain privileges I didn't even mention because I'm trying to keep this video somewhat short because I don't know how many contributions, again, I'm going to have. But I've gotten to a lot of the main ones, at least. There's also like gender privilege, heterosexual privilege, but this should give you an idea of what each one looks like. There's even like different subsets in each category of privileges. For example, I still have hearing and sight privilege. So I don't have able-bodied privilege, but I still have privileges among other disabled people. So it's a complicated process. Now, maybe you've heard the term intersectionality. This was a term coined by lawyer and philosopher Kimberly Crenshaw. She surmised that each of us holds within us different identities, and these identities intersect with different societal challenges. For example, while a white woman will face sexism, a Black woman will face both sexism and racism. She is at the intersection of both race and gender. This becomes more complex the more identities are added. When you think of things this way, privilege is kind of an intersectional thing. As per the previous example, both women will face the same barriers of sexism, but only the Black woman faces racism. Because of this, the white woman is able to be both the oppressed and the oppressor. Another example of this might be a gay white man. Because he is a man, he holds privilege in the gender category, and he's able to hold the position of oppressor there. But because he is gay, he's also in the position of oppressed, holding less privilege than his straight counterparts. It's a good idea to figure out where we hold privileges, because then we can figure out who we hold privilege over. This is the key in how we approach situations in which someone holds less privilege than us, because we have the ability to exploit our power which comes in having any privilege, so we can harm a person without even realizing it. And I'm a big believer in harm reduction. And who doesn't want to reduce the harm they cause? I can think of a few just based on the comments I can receive. The reason we have privileges to begin with is due to living in a society with so many inequalities and power imbalances. Dismantling these systems will close the power gap between individuals and groups of individuals so that these privileges lessen or even cease to exist entirely. I don't kid myself that this will happen in my lifetime, but I hope that it will happen eventually. But it means that all of us will have to actually work towards that goal together. And the thing is, privilege benefits us. So when we have it, it's easy to want to hold on to it. But it isn't necessarily better to have it, and we need to understand that too. Anyway, I think that's all I have for you today, and let me know, of course, if this was easy enough to understand. Sometimes I'm kind of explaining things the way that I would understand them, but I'm not sure if others do, so please let me know if you need clarification anywhere. If you'd like to see other playlists from me, you can find them down below, as well as the subscribe button. If you'd like to subscribe, that would be cool. If you don't want to, that's okay. I hope you're staying safe and well, and I'll try and see you soon. Bye, everyone.